Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our amazing panel, Storytelling and Music. I am a film music journalist. My name is Savas, and I love music for visual media. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to go directly to Michael to kick us off for our panel. So, Michael, talk to us about Kite Man. Hell yeah. I mean, were there any particular instruments or musical motifs you used to represent Kite Man and any other recurring characters in the show? And how do these elements evolve throughout the entire season?
Sure, and thanks, Kai, and thanks everyone for coming to this. Appreciate it. So for Kite Man, right from when I met with the show creatives, they mentioned 80s hairband as a direction, which is something that's very near and dear to my heart. So after I got the gig, I immediately went to Guitar Center and used it as an excuse to buy an absolutely authentic 80s hairband guitar. Which is hot pink and has a Floyd Rose, tremolo system for those big dive bombs, hot rodded Seymour Duncans, a super thin neck so you can shred, and that became the heartbeat of the entire score. Even if it was like a love motif between Kite Man and Glider, it was all had this kind of underbelly of 80s hairband, 80s ballads. And the way that evolved throughout the arc of the season was that those cues would get bigger and bigger. They'd start to become hybrid, orchestral, and especially for the big fight scene that kind of is part of the story. So yeah, it was a total blast. And on top of playing all the guitar and many of the other instruments, I also sang 17 songs and wrote 17 songs for the show. And it was just, and those songs ranged from, country western to 80s synth pop to full hair band. And I wrote a jingle for the villain for her Helen Villigan. She has Villigans. So yeah, it was super fun.
Awesome. That's amazing. I mean, congrats on the series. It's fantastic, and the audience response has been awesome. So, yeah, congrats.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So I want to jump over to Vidjay. So, Vidjay, I want to talk about both Super Kitties and Minnie's Bow Tunes. So they're both preschool series aimed at a preschool audience. And I think a lot of people don't realize how intricate preschool programming can be in terms of the writing, animation, and, of course, music, songwriting, and score. So talk to us about that approach. Is there a significantly different approach how you tackle preschool shows like that? And how do you keep it engaging for both the core audience for preschoolers and, of course, the parents who are in the rooms that will have to experience it as well?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming. Especially the preschool animated shows like Super Kitties and Minnie and some other things, they're very, very dense in music. There's like music non-stop. So in order to handle that and make it kind of interesting, especially with Super Kitties, which is kind of a superhero-based show, what I've tried to do is to make things interesting. And one of the ways to do that is to kind of make the music like almost unpredictable. So for example, like I would in the Super Kitties show, I would never use like a 5/1 chord progression, which is like a way to make something predictable. So I always refer to tritones. I don't know if it's too nerdy, but
go deep, go nerdy.
Yeah. So it's that way the music stays kind of like the kids will keep guessing. Oh, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen next? And then, for example, for Minnie, that's more like a traditional old orchestral Disney style music. So in terms of harmony, and harmony is like the way how you use the chords, I'm using more like of the old school like chords that were used in the 30s, 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, but then in like a more modern way. So, but they're both really dense, and to make it kind of like interesting for the like adult audience, I try to make the heartfelt moments or the dramatic moments also more complicated than just using like major chords or minor chords. I always like try to look for like, I don't know, add nines or, like inversions of the chords or make things more interested and again, unpredictable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love that you pointed out like chord progression, stuff like that, because I also work in animation. I work at Warner Brothers Animation and Cartoon Network Studios, and we had our first preschool show at Cartoon Network Studios, and we're working with a child psychiatrist. I mean, you're looking at like brain development, and it's all, and the music is a huge part of that in terms of like, yeah, keep them guessing. I think that's such an interesting aspect of that. Absolutely. Yeah, so I want to next jump over to Doug and Tova. So, for both High School Musical and Zombies, they feature characters kind of expressing themselves through music. So essentially, you are part of the characters' voices, and they're singing in their characters. So talk to me about that process and getting into the characters' heads and working. Do you work with the writers? I'm curious, like how that process is for both of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. A lot of times, we'll always ask for more information than they first give us.
Yeah.
They kind of give us the breakdown of the scene in that moment. And a lot of times we'll go back and ask, well, can we have the script? Because, we don't wake up and immediately jump into one very intense, some of us.
You need to know what happened before.
Yeah,
You
what
need to
happened
know what
before,
happened
what happened
after.
after.
You need
The
to know why they
context.
feel this way. You need to
Right.
know who they're in love with. But you need to know.
Yeah,
You just need to know.
but we do work with the writers and the producer and director just to
Yeah.
kind of make sure we're going down the right path, because
Right.
we want to familiarize ourselves with what they're going through, so we can, in a relatable way, pick pieces. Because I feel like, especially when you're writing lyrics and stuff too, you may not always relate directly to, especially for writing for film and TV, you have to find ways to relate to that scene so it can feel genuine, because you kind of have to put on their hat as well.
Yeah.
I feel like every project is a little bit different. So sometimes they'll hit you up and they'll give you, like Doug said, like this much information, and you're like, no, we need more. And then sometimes they do come to you and they're like, here's the script and here's where the writers want to go, and come on in and let's talk to you and to them and get everyone on the same page. Because essentially we did a lot in the pop world before we entered the film and TV world. And we left the pop world, or we 90% left the pop world, because we do a few things, because we got really bored a lot of the times, because you're kind of writing the same thing over and over and over. So when we came to film and TV, what we loved so much about it was there's different people, there's different perspectives, there's different, sonic worlds for us to play in. And we very intentionally we want to write the music that is sung on camera, that is moving the script, that is telling the story, that has perspectives. And for a lot of our songs, when you have all that knowledge, like that's going to inform your lyrics, like that. Okay, we joke all the time, because I'm the script reader here. So like I'll go and read this whole script, and then we'll start writing lyrics, and he'll have a great
I'll ask
lyric.
for the cliff notes.
Yeah, you'll be like, give me the cliff
Sum up
notes,
what
and then I'll
happened.
act it out in the studio. And he'll have a great lyric, and I'll be like, we can't do that because, the sister dies over here, and that's going to clash. So there's a lot more to writing.
Dramatic.
Well, sometimes that's what happens, but there's a lot more.
across that
Sometimes
yet.
they die. It's not my fault. Talk to the writers.
Right.
But yeah, so for us, that's like the fun part of the
Yeah.
challenge, and being part of the bigger picture is
Yeah.
like what we kind of fell in love with. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other? Was
Just
that the answer?
Sometime they die quote was just.
Sometimes they die, and you work with that.
Yes. you are.
Okay.
Absolutely. I want to jump over to Nina next. So Nina, both music videos for Pariah's Werecar and Roadblock are visually striking. So I'm curious, how did you approach editing these music videos to tell a cohesive story that also complements Pariah's music?
So different music videos come with different challenges, and fortunately for these two, I was also the animator, so I got to make the story for myself.
Amazing.
But whenever I'm making a music video, I kind of go in with the editor mind, where I'm very systematic, actually. I break down the song. Where's the beginning, where's the end, what are the themes that they return to and that they change up, where does it make sense from story structure for certain things to happen? Just like in a book or a movie, music has a song, for example, would have a climax, so you want to kind of make sure that the climax of the story is kind of around where the climax of the song is happening, as long as the energy kind of matches, which is the other factor that you kind of have to pay attention to. It's, what different stories will resonate better with different energies and different rhythms, so in terms of like visual cutting as well. So again, with these two, it was, I hesitate to say easier because it's a lot of work to animate stuff, but it was, I had total freedom to be able to say, okay, the beginning of the story needs to ramp up here, and then we need to get into the meat of the story that's going to keep people interested until we get to the climax, which is going to happen at around this mark. So how long is it going to take for me what kind of shots do I need here to be interested enough so that people keep watching, and then it all makes sense. So That's my approach to it.
Yeah, I mean, and especially with animation, the timing has to be so specific. I mean, there's no, you have to come up with that kind of. Do you, when you're doing, I'm curious, like, you have an animatic to start, and kind of you're able to flex it a little bit before you kind of lock it?
Yeah, I listen to the song a lot. I listen to the lyrics. I figure out if the lyrics kind of match the vibe story that I'm going with, the energy of the music, as well as what kind of story I want to tell. Sometimes it's not explicit. Werecar, that one kind of lended itself to a werewolf story, so I went with that one. But the first one was a lot more ambiguous, I would say, in terms of what the lyrics were trying to say. So, so my interpretation of it was, what's a simple story that people could relate to. Yeah. And it's funny because as I got deeper into it, and then once you get to the climax of the song, there's a big solo and a breakdown, and the character gets kind of absorbed by this spirit that he meets in the woods. And now you're going back and you're seeing everything that led him up to this moment. Yeah. And so that's, I'm pretty, it really depends on the song, and those are two kind of very different approaches that I took with those, even though it's the same band from the same album.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So, I want to jumping back over to Michael. So the tone of Kite Man, hell yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's, it bounces between kind of absurdity, humor, of course, moments of genuine character development. So I'm curious, it's also adult animation, so you get to, really just hammer in and go kind of wild. So I'm curious, how did you manage kind of these tonal shifts to keep the story cohesive and be able to make the music kind of not, get too distracting and still kind of keep that through line?
Sure. Well, first let me say that what everyone said up here just totally resonates with me, and I think speaks to your question. Knowing the world, going deep into the world, and knowing what happens in the last frame of the series before you start scoring the first frame can completely change the dynamic of how you approach things, and just the fact that Vidjay, you want to do something different that's keeps people guessing, and you're talking about Nina, you're talking about how we're just all storytellers up here, really. We just have different tools that we're using, and so to that end, for me, I always looked at it like the music is on the screen. I mean, it is music for picture, so it's like the notes are already up there, and it's on me to kind of translate in collaboration with the filmmakers to do that. For me, there's no line between animation and live action. It's all filmmaking. It's all storytelling. And so for Kite Man, for example, this is a guy who has no powers, and his power is he has a kite on his back. So, but I treated him very seriously as a character, and for me, he's just all heart, and so I would play things straight, makes it funnier. Not play anything at all when the music comes in, that much more impactful. But really, I just let the story tell me what to do.
Yeah, I'm curious because when I talk to composers who are writing comedy for live action, they always say don't play the comedy, like kind of let the comedy be. So I'm curious with animation, you have that term Mickey Mousing, of course, going back to
Carl Stalling.
Yeah, so I'm curious for you as a composer for animation, you said there's no difference between live action and animation, but for comedy moments, do you approach it differently for animation and live action? I'm just curious.
So much of it depends on the tone of the story you're telling. Yeah. But I think, like live action, a lot has evolved in comedic storytelling through music. Yeah. So, like what you're talking about, like see and say, scoring by the second, I think we're seeing less of that, letting the joke happen, and then playing the outro of it, or less pizzicato strings, if you will, but just to say, sometimes those pits are exactly what you want.
Absolutely, yeah. So I want to jump back to Vidjay. So you mentioned again, same thing with like we were talking about kind of tonal, different like how you treat different audiences. So preschool versus adult, but in terms of like, and you said it's very much wall-to-wall music. When you have those shifts in tones, similar to kind of what Michael's doing on an adult animated series for preschool, how do you handle those shifts especially with the shorter, maybe like a shorter 11-minute episode or anything like that? And I'm curious, when you have to go from something that's more action-based to maybe something that's more intimate or more kind of heartfelt. So I'm curious, is there, I guess, an art to that? And do you have to work with somebody to give you notes and be like, that's going to be too scary or too, I'm curious what's like doing that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, certainly. So because the shows I'm mainly working on are for kids. It can never be too scary, especially Disney is very clear about that. So, and obviously there's so much things going on, like in 1 minute, like even in 10 seconds. So to completely, like to answer your first question about like shifting, it's all about the transitions between to the different emotions, and they go like really fast, especially with kids animation.
Yeah.
So I'm closely looking at what the characters are saying and feeling, and it shifts constantly. So it's all about like how to transition from one emotion to another one, and it's still musical, and it still tells the story. So that's kind of like, it's not easy, but that's one of the things that is very important. And in terms of like not to make it scary, whenever something is scary or the stakes are always high for the characters, but they're never really gonna die or something like that. Like, you know.
See?
At least not yet. And one of the things, like I wouldn't call it a trick, is what we do is like when something is like really tense or dangerous, then immediately after we have some sort of a release with comedy, and most of the time it's already written in the script because there's like something gonna happen, and then there's like a joke that will be told by a character, like some kind of a comic relief. So with the music, we definitely have to like accent that and exaggerate like the comedy and the danger. But I always have to be very careful with dangerous music.
Have you gotten any funny like studio notes or network notes from any of your shows? Something that was like, hey.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I'm working on so many different shows, and all the sensibilities from different showrunners or network executives are so different because, and then over time, like, that person, they don't like high strings because that, for them, that associates them like with danger or horror.
It's like
And
Psycho,
then
you
for
know,
the other
you get
person,
two Bernard
it's
Herrmann,
like, yeah, exactly. And then someone else loves that, and like for Super Kitties, it's very. We have to be really careful, but I just did a show called Kindergarten the Musical, which is also preschool, but we go like hard into horror sometimes. But that's like also because of the tone, what you were saying, of the show, we can go, it's about kids, and in their world, it's really, something is really scary, so we exaggerate in that corner, and that makes things really funny.
Yeah.
But not so much with Super Kitties. That's
Of course not. I always, I guess, I work in animation too. Not so much preschool, but kind of more the 6 to 11 range. But the notes are always funny because like we have a show where like, and somebody will chug a can of something. They're like, it needs to say soda very clearly on the side of that can. It can't be mistaken for anything else.
It's so funny, like like with Super Kitties, for example, like it's a for superhero cats, and it's like a fantasy world, and there's like, villains, and they're all animals, and they're all like in this fictional city, and it's all like very fictional. But whenever, like, just to give an example, whenever a character drives any vehicle, it can be like a spaceship or like a plane or a car. Yeah. They have to wear seatbelts.
Absolutely.
Like, even if it's like silly.
We had to do there's a show called Clarence that's no longer there anymore, but I remember it came back and we forgot to animate the seatbelt, and we had to go back and redo the whole animation for that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, but I want to jump over back to Doug and Tova. So we already kind of touched about this, kind of working with the writers. You're kind of embodying the voice of these characters. So, and I'm curious in terms of what is your dialogue with the writers or the showrunner. I'm curious, who's your point person because you are part of the storytelling team. So how do you map out arcs? How do you make sure that your songs are making that arc and kind of fitting into are they giving you the gaps? Does the script come with, I forget if you mentioned this, gaps like song here, song here, song here?
Yes.
So is it like that?
That definitely happens.
Okay.
It really varies project to project because depending what we're working on, who we're working with, sometimes it's directly with the showrunner.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's a music point person. Sometimes there's a team, and there's the writers, and there's the this, and it's a whole party.
Yeah.
So essentially, for most of what we do, it's already mapped out, and they'll come to us. Sometimes we'll get dummy lyrics, which are fun. And
So it's like
dummy
the
lyrics
writers team
are
just do
when
that?
a writer who's writing the script will be like, oh, here's like an example of what we want. Often it's not what they want. But they put it in there to kind of give you an idea of what the character is feeling. And then sometimes we literally get a very large blank page that says, insert song here. And luckily with a few of our projects, like once you really know the team and they know you, there's a lot of trust there. And we'll just give it our first go. We'll send it back, get notes. What am I missing here?
No,
Did we
I mean,
get-
it's pretty straightforward when it comes to that. And like you said, over time, you kind of just build trust and relationships with these
Yeah.
people that you've worked with so many times over the years. It's just like, here's the script. This is where the songs are going to go.
Yeah.
Do your thing. We trust you.
Right.
And sometimes they will say, like, this is a really big moment. Like, yeah, it might not look like that, but we're going to animate it a certain way, or it's going to be whatever. It's going to be this type of set, and we need all the energy in the bridge or
Yeah.
wherever.
I mean, one thing they will do, from depending on the show too, is they will give us musical influences at least to kind of lean a certain way, so we know,
Yeah.
it's going to be a ballad, it's going to be uplifting pop song.
Will they give you like a playlist, like a
Yeah, it-
sometimes,
sometimes
Disney
playlist-
likes playlists.
Yes.
playlist? No, do
Um,
they temp with a song already like in a cut of something or no?
No, I
No.
mean, we're
No.
usually
Thankfully.
way before
Yeah.
that, before there's even any live footage or even an
The
animation.
team might reference, like, which
Yeah.
sometimes different people on the team reference very different songs as well. And so then
Yes,
you're like,
that's-
oh, you don't really want it to sound like the song from the 70s at all, but you want the vibe of that, and you want the energy from this song, but you want the emotion from this
Yeah.
one. And that's our
Yeah,
job
it's
to
kind
like
of like
crack that
picking
code.
pulling from different things, but
But on a sidebar, we've started developing our own material,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so like we came up with a concept for an animated film. We're currently developing and working with producers. And for the first time, we have every song, right? With,
Yeah,
like this
yeah.
was what we wanted to do from the beginning. And that is a very different relationship because it's us and the writer and going, okay, we're literally making that blueprint together.
Yeah.
It's very fun. Yeah, so it's so project based.
I'm sure, yeah. I'm curious when it comes to like linear TV and you have a very fixed time and it just says insert song here. Do they give you like this is going to be a 2 minute 30-second song?
Oh, that would be great if they
Yeah.
gave us 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That would be amazing.
it actually kind of fluctuates. I say between there. I think live action it tends to be a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I think 2 minutes and 30 seconds is safe. Animated is probably between 30 seconds to a minute 30, but we
Yeah.
always start off with a full song. Verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse,
Yeah.
pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, whatever, because we always end up doing a cut down. And,
Yeah.
and we learned, because at first it'd be like, oh, could we do a 30-second song here? Sure, we got you, no problem. Like, oh, we love this so much. Can you do a full song? So it's much easier to do the full song and then cut down after that.
We have a song coming out on the new Zombies movie that'll be out soon, sometime this summer, next summer. And that started as, here's a song. Okay, now we want a dance break. Okay, now we can't do the dance break. No, wait, bring back half the dance break.
And now double the dance break.
I'm not even joking. Literally, I think by the time we got all the way back to the original.
Completely original from the beginning. The first.
But we have all those cuts.
Yeah.
Like they all exist.
Yeah.
So it
and,
just.
and quick side note, talking about notes back from the network, we were
Oh my
working on,
God.
I think it was a Marvel
I know what you're going to say.
project, but it was for kids, and we had a lyric that was just a metaphor, like oh, set the world on fire, because it was a villain that was
It was
singing this.
screaming Mimi,
It was screaming,
and
yeah.
she's badass,
Yeah.
and she kills people with her voice.
Right, so
you
we
know,
said
so
that.
we thought we could say something.
Right, and the network came back.
Wait, what we said was like, "Oh, I'm pouring gasoline" or
Yeah,
something like.
something. It was a metaphor. We're not literally telling people to do bad things. With
And this
flames.
was the note.
And they came back and said, we need to change this lyric. We cannot support arson.
We cannot. We cannot
So-
support. Sadly,
Sadly.
we cannot support.
Yes, there was a
arson.
sad.
I wasn't going to say anything,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah,
glad.
yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We'd like to, but we can't.
Yeah.
One day.
Those notes are the best. We cannot support arson.
Sadly.
Sadly. But I want to jump over to Nina again. So Nina, storytelling in music videos often needs to be kind of condensed into just a few minutes. So how do you create narrative arcs, or themes within such a short time frame? And how do you decide what story elements to focus on? Like, are you doing like a 3-act structure? Are you building that out and within the 3 or 4 minutes that you have? I'm curious. Like,
The short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It all really comes back down to structure. I mean,
Yeah.
as an editor, that's really my main job, is to make sure that the story is structured in a way that the person that's watching it understands what's happening
Yeah.
and is still accurately conveying the feelings and the emotions of the characters on the screen, but also the vision of the director and the producers and the writers and literally everybody else. So there's kind of a lot of onus on the editor to be able to really understand story structure, why things work the way they work, and understand different kinds of story structures. So just like in music, there's different types of songs with different kinds of structures that are very measurable, actually. They're for not just for the ease of everybody being able to play it together in an orchestra, but also for the people that are listening to actually understand the movements through it. So there's a lot of logic in it, and therefore when you go back to the song structure and music videos in particular, I always start with the song structure and I literally break it down. I'll say, even if there's no lyrics in it and it's an instrumental, like Work Hard, for example, there's really not a lot of lyrics happening in that. He just kind of barks every once in a while. There are words in it, but he's yelling, and you don't really understand what he's saying, I guess. But and that's also a song that's really kind of got an odd time to it. So the structure is different than something that would lend itself to a 3-act structure of a story, but in some ways, it makes sense for me to simplify the story as much as possible back down to a 3-act story structure for a song like that, because it's actually more digestible as a whole when you have a song that's time signature-wise a little bit more complicated, structure-wise a little bit more complicated than your average song, I guess, and then and still kind of having the flow of there's a beginning to this story, what's happening, who is this character, why do we care about him, what's he see? Oh, there's something else behind here. Okay, now we can follow along on his journey until the climax of the song, the climax of the story, which is, the climax of the end of the second act that brings us down to the denouement, the third act, and also the outro of the song. So it all works together, and it really honestly comes down to structure. That's from both an editing and a musical, and again, with these ones, it's unique because I'm also creating the story in these with the animation, but all of it comes back down to structure.
Absolutely. Well, before we're gonna have, I do want to have some time for any audience questions, but before we kind of wrap things up, I kind of want to just go down the line and ask you guys what your favorite, just not something that you've worked on, something that either you grew up with, or something recent. I think our brains really latch onto kind of these moments in film, TV, anything that just, music is a huge part of it. For me, I'm a huge fan of spaghetti westerns, so the end of Good, Bad, the Ugly for me is like that moment that like sticks out, because that was done back in the day where the score was composed beforehand and played on set and then edited to it. That's something that Leone and Morricone was unique to. But so I'm curious down the line, is there something that sticks in your mind that kind of was like maybe something inspirational that like, oh, the music really made the storytelling awesome for you, or emotional for you? So Doug, maybe would kick us off.
Yeah, I grew up on the East Coast, right outside New York City in New Jersey, and my mom used to bring me to a lot of theater and stuff like that, even though I kind of grew up playing like rock bands and touring and doing that. But I'll never forget, I think the first time I saw Rent, I don't remember how that for me, just something just clicked, and I was just like in tandem with music and story. It was beautiful to me. Because they just the marriage of the two created something just more dimensional than just listening to music with headphones or just watching, something with just dialogue on TV. And I just got really inspired. And I didn't end up getting into storytelling through music because, again, started just like Tova in the regular pop world where we were just writing pop songs. Yeah. But it was something that always stuck in me. I was like, I knew I wanted to do that one day. So I'm glad it caught up and I ended up doing it.
Tova, how about you?
I have 2 answers.
Sure.
So we have to go back to Alan Menken.
Oh, yeah.
We have to talk about Alan Menken and Disney and all early Disney.
Yes.
Like, Little Mermaid is alive and well today, and I was like 3 years old, like, oh, I love Little Mermaid. And I remember even as a very weird, small child looking at, like, back then there were liner notes, but like looking and like who's singing and who wrote it, which now I think is weird, but I didn't think it was weird then. I think it's just like, especially when you're a younger kid, and this is why I kind of have this bone to pick with people who dumb down things for children and don't understand that children's music is not dumb at all, is like kids a lot of times can't express their emotions and then you hear like a song like Part of Your World or something, and you don't even know why you're feeling what you're feeling when you
Yes,
feel it.
yeah.
And I mean, that's just a beautiful piece of music for any age. So I very much remember like the whole Disney storytelling being very important in my life.
Yeah.
And Grease was a
Oh.
big deal for
There
me.
you go.
Again, pretty young, like 6, 7. And obviously I had no idea what it was about. But yeah, that to me was like, it made everything more lively and more fun and more exciting. And like, it's just, there's something very, very special about, I think, the world that we play in. I really do.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I agree with that completely because I know Don Bluth has that famous quote where like all his films were never dumbed down or anything, or simplified, something like Land
Yeah.
Before Time. And people go, oh, that wrecked me. It's like, yeah, the
It-
emotions are real. You should
Yeah,
feel
kids
that.
have
Yeah, yeah,
emotions.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
okay,
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, jumping over to Michael, for you.
Well, let me just say +1 on your answers here, because the Morricone stuff, I mean, Good, Badly, Ugly was the third in the trilogy, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, I mean, Ennio Morricone is the master.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that Leone indeed was almost making the film to the music.
Pretty much, yeah.
Especially Ecstasy of Gold, like
Yep,
that.
the whole sequence, yeah.
And then Grease, my next door neighbors and I, we reenacted Grease
Amazing.
for our parents. And
I did as well.
Cheers.
Not to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
neighbors,
yeah,
but, like,
yeah,
my own neighbors,
yeah.
yes.
And I think what comes up from how it's not just nostalgia, because I can't speak for you all, but for me, it's not just nostalgia. It's also, I think, films were a bit different back then. There was, because of the distraction world that we're living in now, the edits are tighter. There's no time. We have to get to it. But this is a time when you could just say, what's happening here? The page is blank. It's just music and imagery.
Yeah.
And that really, I feel like what's happening orally is just totally informing what's happening here.
Yeah.
And if I had to, off the top of my head, if I had to think of a modern day example of that, I mean, the Dune films, the new ones, it's just, the imagery is just incredible, and then they give moments over to the score that I feel just like you feel like you're on Arrakis, you feel like you're in that world. So
Those moments, I think at the end of E.T. springs to mind. Like 20 minutes of just no dialogue and just John Williams taking you to the complete ending, and that's it. You're done. Like, you don't need dialogue. So that script is just blank, but it comes together in visuals and music for sure. But yeah, absolutely. So Nina, how about you?
I'm also on the Disney train. Let's
It's a good train.
like if there was one movie that just sealed the deal for me becoming an editor / animator / all the things I do, it'd be Beauty and the Beast, because when
so good.
that movie opens up, it's got this beautiful score, and the narration is it's all just so magical, and you get sucked in immediately, and all these themes that are set up in the first 2 minutes of that movie come back throughout the rest of the movie, in different forms, and it just blends itself beautifully into the first song of the movie, and it just it goes from here we go back to structure again, but it's you kind of come in with curiosity, and then it's a little bit happy, oh, this guy has a big castle and happy people, and then it turns out he's actually a jerk, and then it gets really dark for a minute, and then you're back on this pastoral France, and the entire song that she sings is this totally backhanded compliment of the town. So it's it hits every single tone you could possibly think within the first 5 minutes of that movie, and it's carried throughout the rest of the movie. And so just the way that the music and the story and the visual, everything in that movie, I just think is perfect. So
Absolutely,
It is.
That's it. Yeah, so Vidjay, how about you? You want to close us up with that?
Well, obviously, I'm also on the Disney train, but I'm very happy to work with Disney now. But so something else that comes to mind is a movie, I think it's 20 years ago. It's called The Triplets of Belleville.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
won
that
an
movie
Oscar.
has no dialogue, and it's a 90-minute movie, and it's all music.
Yeah.
It was nominated for music as well at the time for an Oscar. I think that movie is amazing because all the storytelling is through music and the amazing animation.
Yeah.
And then in live action world, it's definitely Bernard Herrmann, Hitchcock,
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, amazing answers, amazing answers. But yeah, we have just 10 minutes left here, so I want to open up the audience. Is there anybody that has a question? Yes, right up here up front.
My name is Sammy, and what I want to highlight is when it comes to musical pieces, and just in general, anything from musical scores, from guitar, Tarzan, any form of music, is there any piece that you particularly remember hearing that you love and enjoyed putting together? If so, what was it?
Thanks for the question, Sammy. Yeah, I think for me, this kind of threads back into what we were just talking about. For me, I love moments when you're given the opportunity to just be one with the film, no dialogue, maybe no sound effects. And for Warner Brothers, for their direct-to-video animated films, you'll very often get these extended 1 minute to 2 minute main title sequences. And I did a pair of films called Batman: The Long Halloween. And for both films, I was just given free rein to score these beautiful title sequences, no sound effects, just music. And for me, that was really, first of all, I'm a huge Batman fan, and so it was already a dream come true.
Yeah.
But cheers. Cheers. So yeah, that for me, in reference to my own work, that would be one of those moments where I was, that I really cherish, is having that opportunity. I think, well, yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what you all have to say for this, because
I think in general we all start out without a musical background. It's the desire to have one that kind of leads us to realize we're really passionate about this. And I remember hearing a quote, which is, especially at least in this industry, that I've related to the most, is you can't love it, you have to be obsessed with it. Because when you're obsessed with something, at least for me, I've noticed, if you love something, that this industry, just like anything, there's a lot of no's, which people don't realize. We're up here advertising our yeses that we've all gotten, but it took years and years of no. And just like when you're in a relationship with anybody, if they turn you down, you'll retreat. But when you're obsessed, you stalk it. You're like, oh no, I'm coming after you. So I think when that clicks, when you're young, old, middle, whatever, I mean, if you are passionate about it, it doesn't matter how much background you have, you're gonna go get it. So
I'll just add one last thing. I do have a friend who, he's an engineer. He doesn't do exactly what we do, but he's engineered some of the biggest records you've ever heard of, from Taylor Swift to you name it. And he had gone to school for something else. He had started a career in something else. He was unhappy in something else. And with what he wanted to do, he needed a certain scope of skills, technical skills. And he went back and he was in school with people who were like 15 years younger than him, and he did it. And then normally that world specifically takes a very long time to get to that point. People intern for years and they're getting coffee for people for 10 years. And this guy hustled. And I know people who've been doing it twice as long as him who do not have the gigs he has, because he's really smart, he's really humble, he works really, really hard, and he really wanted to do it. And yeah, I do believe you can do that.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can tag along, I mean, I think especially in what we do in storytelling, like I see it as storytelling is a different skill than like actually making the music. And there's plenty of people who can make beautiful music, but they cannot maybe storytell.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I think that's like, especially this kind of work, if you can storytell and somehow, and that what you said, Tova, about like skills, like the music, there's a big part of it is skills, like learn how to play an instrument, or like, I don't know, learn how to make sound out of a computer, even, if you cannot read notes or something like that. But if you know how to translate sound into some sort of like a storytelling device, that might get you work.
Yeah, well, we have just hit the time, so I want to thank everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for
thanks,
coming.
everybody.
Thank you, Doug, Tova, Michael,
much.
Nina, and
Thank you.
Vidjay for being here for us today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Impact 24 PR and Comic-Con. Thank you, everybody.